Well, I can tell you that the destruction of the early warning strategic radar, which was part of the Russian early warning system, was a good example of such a trigger. We're very fortunate that the Russians have not responded to that. That alone raises eyebrows because people assume, well, you're trying to destroy our early warning system. The next thing we should expect is a nuclear attack. So that's very, very dangerous. And I think something in that category is probably going to trigger. Now, keep some things in mind. First of all, nothing happens on the ground in Ukraine, or I would argue in most of Eastern Europe, that the Russians aren't aware of. Remember, they have space-based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It's very, very good. Secondly, I think it's very important for us to understand that we've had some strikes recently using hypersonic missiles in the vicinity of Lviv. We think 100 officers, NATO and Ukrainian, were killed in that. Now, we don't admit to the U.S. officers and support personnel who've been killed in Ukraine. We just don't admit it. The French have been embarrassed because it was hard to cover up. The British don't admit anything. Nobody wants to admit that they've got anybody on the ground there. But that was a signal. That was an underground facility. That was a well-known former Soviet area, Arab barracks and airfield and so forth. A big training hub for NATO and Ukraine. And they annihilated it, killing at least 100 and wounding another 200. It was a major, major strike. It's hard for me to believe that we are so stupid as to announce our willingness to strike Russian territory and not understand that what happened in Western Ukraine could happen in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Romania, Slovakia. And we need to wake up. These are not idle threats. The capabilities exist. And again, if he senses that we are going to mass air power, we've got 1,000 F-15s. Remember, F-15s are nuclear capable. And if they show up in great numbers in 600 or 700 and prepare to launch, I would expect those aerodromes, airfields to be lost. The Russians will target them. And the easiest way to annihilate them is with a tactical nuclear weapon. I don't see any change in Washington now in the foreseeable future unless the Russians retaliate very strongly against us in Eastern Europe. And I'm talking about, as I said before, these key areas, logistical sites, airports, and so forth, even logistical nets that depend on rail. I disagree with John Mearsheimer, and I rarely do. The one thing that I disagree with here is he talked about we would be dragged into a war. Wrong, John. We've been dragging Europe into this war from day one. The Europeans now have second thoughts. They're scared. And in fact, behind this facade of solidarity, things are falling apart. Why do you think Scholz spoke and said what he did? Everybody else in Europe nodded their heads. No, we are not invading Russia. It's not going to happen. We're the ones that continue to provoke. We're the ones that are continuing to maintain, with British help, this corrupt puppet regime in Kyiv, whose only mission in life is to either sacrifice as many Ukrainians as possible and to do as much damage as they can to Russia. And frankly, they haven't done much damage at all. You know, today it was announced that Russia has officially become, I think, the 5th largest economy in the world after Japan. Gosh, what a huge achievement for the Biden administration and his friends and stupid supporters in both parties sitting in Congress. They've made Russia a superpower again.
What this represents and what is actually happening in the northern part of Ukraine?
I think you're witnessing the sort of spring rainstorm before the flood. And this is really one of those shaping operations. It's going to contribute to the fall of Kharkov and the movement further west and north by Russian forces in the area. It's very clear right now that there are several things baking in the oven. One is what I just described. The other is coming south out of Belarusia. A potential buildup there. Well, actually, it is a buildup. And I think that they, at the right point in time, will sweep south and cut off Kyiv. By that time, most of these Russian troops should be further west. Now, what's the point of all of this? First of all, if you know that you're winning, and that is clearly the case with the Russians, what are you concerned about? You're concerned about taking no unnecessary casualties. So the emphasis on keeping Russian losses very low is probably greater now than at almost any point in this war. Putin and his generals have been very, very concerned about the preservation of Russian life, more so, I would argue, than any previous Russian or Soviet military establishment in living memory. And right now, I think that continues to bother him. At the same time, you've got to look at the maps, look at the road nets, look where the rail lines are, look at the rivers and streams, and then you'll see that these shaping attacks make sense. So I think you're going to see something much larger and much faster in the near future, because he does want to wrap this up. The question is, as he wraps this up, what occurs in Kyiv, especially when it becomes clear that the Russians are headed down towards it as from the north as also from the east. I suspect we'll see Zelensky packing his bags and leaving.
Now, it's ironic because from the Western perspective, and I want to look at what it at least on the surface appears to be almost contradictory information. One thing may look like it's something positive for the Russian side, and another thing looks like it's on the negative side for the Russian. For example, Bloomberg here published just a couple of days ago saying that Putin is really running out of time because he's trying to achieve this breakthrough. He made this incursion into the north part of the Kharkiv area on the 10th of May, and the claim, at least on the western side, is that he has bogged down after getting about 10 kilometers in these two areas by Lipsy and Volchansk. We'll show that on the map in just a minute. That it's bogged down and now it's stopped, and the flow of Western aid has started to come through. Ukraine had a bunch of reinforcements that they moved up into the area and are now actually conducting limited counterattacks and are taking back some of the territory in the Volchansk city itself. How do you compare those things with the view that you just shared?
Well, I can't confirm the validity of those reports. I think there are several things at play here. First, I would be very suspicious of any claims of Ukrainian advances anywhere. What we get is evidence that Ukrainians are abandoning positions, abandoning defensive lines, abandoning villages, so that the Russians are not being compelled to fight very hard at all for any of it. Secondly, the Russians continue to invite and want more Ukrainian forces to come north and go east. The more they can bring up there, the easier it will be further south when they cross the Dnieper River. So the Russians have a lot of things on their minds at this point. Now, as far as our weapons are concerned, keep the following in mind.
The world watches with bated breath as the conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues. This is not just a regional conflict, it has global implications. Understanding the complexities of this situation is crucial for every nation. The conflict has already caused immense suffering and instability, and its trajectory remains uncertain. The international community grapples with the economic and humanitarian consequences of the war. Peace seems like a distant hope. The situation demands attention. The world must understand the stakes and work towards a peaceful resolution. The human cost of this conflict is immeasurable. Families are torn apart, lives are lost, and futures are uncertain. The world cannot stand idly by as this crisis unfolds. We must seek a path to peace and stability. The conflict in Ukraine is a stark reminder of the fragility of peace. It highlights the interconnectedness of global security and the importance of diplomacy. The world must unite in its condemnation of violence and work towards a swift and peaceful resolution. In a brazen attack, Russia targeted and destroyed a key early warning system in Ukraine. This act has sent shockwaves through the international community. It raises serious concerns about the Kremlin's willingness to escalate the conflict. Experts warn that such actions could have unintended and catastrophic consequences. The early warning system played a vital role in monitoring potential threats. Its destruction leaves a dangerous gap in regional security. This act of aggression undermines trust and raises the specter of miscalculation. The international community must condemn this act and demand accountability. The destruction of the early warning system is a clear violation of international norms. It sets a dangerous precedent for future conflicts. The world cannot afford to ignore such reckless behavior. Dialogue and diplomacy are crucial to preventing further escalation. This incident underscores the fragility of peace and the importance of communication. The international community must work together to de-escalate tensions and find a peaceful resolution. Failure to do so could have dire consequences for all involved. Russia has displayed a sophisticated military strategy in Ukraine. Its forces have demonstrated advanced capabilities in various domains. From cyber warfare to hypersonic missiles, Russia has shown its willingness to utilize its full military arsenal. This display of power has raised concerns about the potential for a wider conflict. Russia's military doctrine emphasizes precision strikes and rapid maneuvers. Its forces have effectively targeted key infrastructure and military installations in Ukraine. This approach aims to cripple Ukraine's ability to defend itself and maintain control over its territory. The world watches with concern as these events unfold. Russia's military capabilities extend beyond conventional warfare. Its cyber attacks have disrupted critical infrastructure and sown discord within Ukrainian society. This multifaceted approach highlights the complex nature of modern warfare. The international community must adapt its strategies to address these evolving threats. The conflict in Ukraine serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of modern warfare. It highlights the need for international cooperation to prevent further escalation and the proliferation of advanced weaponry. The world must work together to find peaceful solutions to international dispute. Hypersonic warfare, a new era of conflict. The conflict in Ukraine has marked the arrival of hypersonic weapons on the battlefield, showcasing their devastating potential. Russia's use of these missiles has raised concerns about a new arms race as nations scramble to develop similar capabilities. Hypersonic weapons travel at incredible speeds and are highly maneuverable, making them difficult to intercept and counter. This technology has the potential to change the face of warfare, introducing new strategies and challenges for military forces worldwide. Hypersonic missiles pose a significant challenge to traditional defense systems, which are not designed to handle such advanced threats. Their speed and agility make them difficult to track and target, complicating defense efforts and increasing the risk of successful strikes. This technology could give Russia a significant military advantage, potentially shifting the balance of power in their favor. The international community must work together to address the proliferation of these weapons, ensuring they do not fall into the wrong hands. The development and deployment of hypersonic weapons raise serious ethical and strategic questions, challenging existing norms and treaties. Their use could lead to an escalation of conflict and undermine global stability, making diplomatic solutions more difficult to achieve. The international community must engage in dialogue to establish norms and regulations surrounding this new technology, preventing misuse and promoting peace. The emergence of hypersonic warfare underscores the need for international cooperation and arms control, as no single nation can address these challenges alone. The world cannot afford to enter an era of unchecked technological advancement in weaponry, which could lead to catastrophic consequences. Diplomacy and dialogue are essential to preventing a destabilizing arms race, ensuring a safer and more stable future for all. NATO's response: walking a tightrope. NATO faces a delicate balancing act in its response to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a situation fraught with complexities and high stakes. The alliance is committed to supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, standing firm in its principles. However, NATO must avoid actions that could escalate the conflict into a wider war with Russia, a scenario that could have devastating global consequences. This requires a measured and strategic approach, balancing support with caution. NATO has provided Ukraine with military aid, including weapons systems and training to help bolster its defenses. The alliance has also strengthened its military presence in Eastern Europe as a show of deterrence, conducting regular military exercises. These actions aim to bolster Ukraine's defenses and deter further Russian aggression, sending a clear message of support. The world watches closely as NATO navigates this complex situation, with every move scrutinized by international observers. NATO's response to the conflict has been met with a mix of support and criticism, reflecting the diverse opinions on the best course of action. Some argue that the alliance should take a more assertive stance, while others warn against provoking Russia and risking a larger conflict. Finding the right balance is crucial for maintaining peace and stability in the region, requiring delicate and ongoing negotiations. NATO's role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict highlights the importance of collective defense and diplomacy, showcasing the need for unity among allies. The alliance must work together with its partners to find a peaceful resolution to the crisis, emphasizing the power of collaboration. The world looks to NATO for leadership and stability in these uncertain times, hoping for a resolution that ensures lasting peace. The U.S. position: a balancing act. The United States faces its own set of challenges in responding to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This conflict has put the U.S. in a delicate position, requiring a balance between assertiveness and caution. The US has condemned Russia's actions and imposed sanctions on the country. These sanctions are aimed at crippling Russia's economy and pressuring it to change its course. However, the US must also consider its own national security interests and avoid direct military confrontation with Russia. Engaging in a direct conflict could have severe global repercussions. This requires careful diplomacy and strategic thinking. The US must navigate a complex web of international relations to maintain stability. The US has provided Ukraine with billions of dollars in military and humanitarian aid. This aid is crucial for Ukraine's defense and the well-being of its citizens. The Biden administration has also worked to rally international support for Ukraine and isolate Russia on the world stage. This involves coordinating with NATO allies and other international partners. These actions demonstrate the US commitment to supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and deterring further Russian aggression. The US aims to send a clear message that such actions will not be tolerated. The US position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict has evolved over time. Initially, the response was more measured, but it has grown more robust as the situation has escalated. The Biden administration has taken a more assertive stance than its predecessor, providing Ukraine with lethal aid and imposing tougher sanctions on Russia. This marks a significant shift in US policy. This reflects the administration's belief that the US must stand up to Russian aggression and defend democracy around the world. The stakes are high, and the US is committed to its principles. The US role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict highlights the country's global leadership and its commitment to defending democracy and international order. This leadership is crucial in maintaining global stability. The US must continue to work with its allies to find a peaceful resolution to the crisis and hold Russia accountable for its actions. Diplomatic efforts are ongoing, and the US remains steadfast in its resolve. The escalation risk, a nuclear shadow. The conflict in Ukraine carries with it the chilling possibility of escalation. Russia possesses a vast nuclear arsenal, and its rhetoric has raised concerns about the potential use of these weapons. While the risk of nuclear war remains low, it cannot be ignored. The consequences of such an event would be catastrophic. The international community must work tirelessly to prevent any escalation that could lead to the use of nuclear weapons. Dialogue, diplomacy, and de-escalation are paramount. The stakes are simply too high to allow this conflict to spiral out of control. The potential for nuclear escalation underscores the importance of arms control treaties and international cooperation. The world must work together to reduce nuclear stockpiles and prevent the proliferation of these devastating weapons. The future of humanity may depend on it. The shadow of nuclear war hangs over the Russia-Ukraine conflict, serving as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of diplomacy. The world must prioritize de-escalation and work towards a future free from the threat of nuclear annihilation.